Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. That was very compelling presentation. So now let's turn to our discussion. Dr. Muhammad Al-Markabi to offer your comments and also open up for conversation.
Thank you very much, Buharia. Thank you very much, Stephen, for this amazing presentation of your work. It's my honor and my pleasure today to be a discussant with this very important book that's actually almost simultaneously is or will be released in 3 languages. So it was initially published in French, and now with the Columbia University, the English version and the Arabic version has already been translated, and it's about to be published very soon by one of the publishers. Probably I don't need to release that now. And it's an honor for me to be one of the first readers of this great book. Thank you very much. I didn't need to pay for that. I enjoyed reading the whole book. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. So I had the honor to read the book in PDF form. Thank you for your trust and for sending the book. And for me, it's impressive work. It's a great book that actually is quite different from any other book that has been written about Salafism in Egypt. One of its distinctive advantage is that it covers a very long period. So usually social scientists will usually focus on one person. Someone will publish about Rashid Rida, someone about Hilali, someone about Arab Spring, but here it covers a very long period. So for me, that's a very good book to be a reference for students to understand not only one specific time, but also the development, the transformation, the changes, the continuity that's happening for the Salafi or Salafism in Egypt throughout probably more than a century. And Stephen actually depended on a very important primary sources, that actually some rare primary sources. And that was like a little bit surprising for me, because sociologists usually don't do that. They prefer interviews. But actually he did both job very well. And primary sources, historical studies on the early 20th century, but also interviews in the modern time, after the revolution and during the revolution, which actually it combines a lot. It's not only a social scientist study, but also he has a very good knowledge of Islamic studies, which again is very rare to find people, with all due respect, in social sciences who have such a deep knowledge of Islamic studies. So it's not true that he is afraid of Islamic studies scholars. He is a very he wrote that very well, actually. The interviews that he made, actually, he was a very fortunate, very lucky that he managed to find all of those people to accept to have interviews with him. Probably because he made that at the time of the revolution, so there was a very it was a time of freedom. Probably people were happy to speak up about their ideas. He met, I don't know how many people, probably 100 interview. I mean, beginning from the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar to some unknown activist. I mean, like, I think that the information, especially about the interviews, are very unique. And unfortunately, probably we cannot get that anymore. Some of those people you interviewed have already passed away. Muhammad Yusri Salama, Allah yarhamu, Sheikh Saeed Abdul Azim has passed away. Some of them are traveling. This is the term that we use in Egypt. Some of them are traveling, and some others, actually, I'm sure they will not be happy to speak up nowadays in this time. So it's very dense, very rich with the information that I don't think you can never find easily anywhere. And Stephen was actually very brave in such time, and going to Tahrir to meet people during the Tahrir. I mean, the demonstrations. I mean, that was really a very brave step, and definitely it's not only historical and descriptive, but he introduced a very sociological insights, important insights in his work from his main discipline as a sociologist, which is something that again enrich the work itself, and it's very valuable. For example, when he discussed this idea of grammar of action, grammar of entrepreneur, all of these sociological discussions getting from Bourdieu and other guys, actually it adds a lot of value to the book. The book, at least for me, although I'm Egyptian, I lived that issues myself. I mean, definitely not the early 20th century, but I lived after the revolution and before the revolution. It's something that I lived myself, but actually, I should admit, it corrected my perception to many things. So the explanation that he provided for the 28% that Salafis got in the election, which was surprising for everyone, his argument is very interesting that actually this didn't happen just right now. This has a century-long work by the Salafists that was largely unnoticed, that ended up with them gaining ground in such election. So that argument is actually a very interesting argument when he discussed the relationship between the official Islam, the Salafis, and the official Islam, the Azharis, and the Salafis, and the relation between them in the early 20th centuries. The information that Muhammad al-Fiqhi was about to be deprived from his certificate, and that Sheikh Shaltut intervened to help him. That's actually complicates the scenario that we are living nowadays, where there is this very clear distinction between official Islam and Salafis, and the enmity is very clear cut. But actually, what you say is actually give a different perspective, which is very interesting. The way he discussed, for example, which was totally new for me, the influence of Salafists to the Islamists in the time of Abdel Nasser, because for me, the time of Abdel Nasser was like a time of complete, like it was more as a vacant. But what he say is actually Salafists use this time of repression to Muslim Brotherhood to thrive and to grow. It was very surprising to know that Al-Masjid Al-Aziz Billah was built in that time. When you mentioned some people about Dr. Hilmi, that's Mustafa Hilmi, the manuscript in Alexandria, I think this invaluable addition in this book. That's it's even new to me and novel to me. So I really enjoyed reading that book. That book is impressive, and I think it's a must-read for everyone interested in Salafism in Egypt and Salafism in general. The way you divide, for example, the inheritance of Rashid Rida. I mean, that's a very symbolic way that Rashid Rida has two students, Muhammad al-Fiqhi and Hassan al-Banna, and Hassan al-Banna inherited that political part, and he inherited al-Manar, and then Rashid Rida, Muhammad al-Fiqhi completed his tafsir and inherited the theological part. I mean, this symbolic thing, I think I really enjoyed reading this division, this way of clear categorization between Salafism and Islamism. That was really impressive to me. So thank you very much, Stephen. That was a really great job. So I think the first point, if we will begin with the first chapter, Stephen has made an argument that Muhammad Abdu, he doesn't classify him as, I think everyone here knows Muhammad Abdu, that he doesn't classify him as a Salafi, because many academics in the Western academia will simply classify Muhammad Abdu as a Salafi. But I mean, for Egyptians, we don't do that. If you said Muhammad Abdu is a Salafi, people will frown at you. What are you saying? That doesn't makes much sense to us. And Stephen probably aligns himself with Egyptians nowadays, with Western academics, he doesn't classify Muhammad Abdu as a Salafi, or in his own terminology, he doesn't fit with his own grammar of Salafism. So for him, Muhammad Abdu is a more modernist than, although he shares some of the some common ground with Salafism with regard to taqlid, with regard to mazhabism, but he doesn't do that when it comes to theology, for example, for sure. He's a more rational, he's a more Mu'tazili, someone would say, or like reformist Ash'ari. But my question actually, Stephen, is how would you explain what you mentioned about the very good relationship between someone like Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi and the students of Muhammad Abdu? So you mentioned about the Shaltut case. I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the book. Probably you mentioned that, but escaped that. One of the early publications of Majmu' Fatawa Ibn Taymiyyah was published by Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi under the name of Fatawa al-Masriya, Mukhtasar Fatawa al-Masriya. And the editor that Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi approached to edit the Salafi Ibn Taymiyyah Fatawa was Abdul Majid Salim, who was the Mufti and later on the Grand Sheikh of Azhar. And he said in the introduction of Majid Salim that I was approached by my friend Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi, and it's my honor to publish Ibn Taymiyyah's works. And so this close relationship between official Azhari, some people would claim actually, look, these people, Abdul Majid Salim or Shaltut or even al-Maraghi, were more inclined toward Salafism. Would you agree on that or not? And whether you think that this relationship between the students of Muhammad Abdu and the Salafists, how would you situate that within your categorization of Muhammad Abdu as a non-Salafi?
Thank you very much, Mohammed. You have more questions, right? So I should respond now, one by one. Let's do it like a discussion. So this is what I should say. Thank you so much to begin with for everything you said. It's really, your opinion really matters a lot to me. So thank you very much. So your question, I think this is another of these things that needs to be clarified. Modernist and Salafi, at this point, in my understanding, are two different things. And again, Salafi is complicated to use because the term Salafi in that moment, the meaning is not still crystallized. So when we say Salafi, and that's why I say in the book, I use it kind of retrospective, as you say. Like from the 1960s in the Arab world, when people say Salafi, they know exactly what it means. And it doesn't mean Muhammad Abdu. But the way the term had been used in the 20s and 30s would be kind of more diverse. So in order to clarify things, we're kind of using Salafi in a kind of a retrospective way, right? Which is problematic in a way, but everything is problematic when trying to define such a difficult concept. But at least if we use this Salafi, we're using that is retrospective. Muhammad Abdu is not a Salafi because he is not driven by a grammar of purity. It's not about theological purity, right? And I think it's pretty clear that this isn't what drives it. What is interesting is that the reformists and the Salafis, they agree on one thing. They don't like the traditionalists. And they don't like the traditionalists for different reasons. That is, what Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi sees as a bid'ah that is religiously forbidden because it is bid'ah, and end of the discussion. Muhammad Abdu would see it as some kind of backward superstition that's preventing us from being modern people. Right? Both of them would hate the same thing. And Muhammad Abdu himself might use the term bid'ah to describe it, by the way, which kind of complicates things. But what is driving them is, in the one hand, some aspiration to, breaking away from what is seen as backward superstition with a certain understanding of what modernity should look like, and an aspiration to become modern in that sense. Again, I'm using all these ways, quote unquote. And then on the other hand, a more kind of purely religious, more theological understanding of, that's the end of the game. I mean, Salafis would be known for taking this kind of purely religious stance, independently of what political conditions dictate. I think my favorite example, of course, you may know this, is to understand how Salafis can completely distinguish theology from politics, is the famous fatwa by Sheikh al-Albani in 1974. 1974, Sheikh al-Albani is asked about Palestine. What should Palestinians do? Sheikh al-Albani, almost Salafi of the era, makes an answer that would outrage a lot of people at the time. He says, well, Palestinians should leave Palestine because since they cannot practice their faith in Palestine under occupation, they're not able to be fully Muslims in that context. It is better for them to leave Palestine because it's more important to protect your creed than it is to protect your land. Of course, imagine at the time that lots of people were like, what are you saying? I mean, this is politically outrageous. But of course, he was following it. Protect the creed at all costs. Right? So in that sense, I think Muhammad used this kind of denunciation of bid'ah stops there. He's not aspiring to the same ideal modernity that Muhammad Abdul is. For him, it's just a religious. And you can see it when they end up clashing, because beginning, they have a lot of connection, because again they have one common enemy. They're all trying to break from. I mean, it reminds me sometimes, if you want to think about European medical, the Lutherans and the Calvinists. That sense, maybe the Calvinists would be the Salafis and the Lutherans would be the Reformists. And they all both parts of the Protestant movement, and they kind of work with each other but don't like each other sometimes. And because they all agree on one thing, they want to break with the tradition, because so to them the tradition is not a good thing, but they want to break with it for different reasons and with a different. And so that would create links, collaboration sometimes, but eventual clashes, right? I mean, the very interesting clash, of course, is when Mahmoud Shaltut is a reformist, belongs to the school of Muhammad Abdu. When he is a young man, he actually works closely with the Salafis, although he's a reformist, but they agree together against traditionalists in a way. But then Mahmoud Shaltut becomes Sheikh al-Azhar. And as Sheikh al-Azhar, he initiates Taqrib, right? So he's the one who launches in the 50s the big project of bringing together the Shia and the Sunni. And I think at least Mahmoud Shaltut is famous for his fatwa, in which he says that the Shia are the fifth school of Islam, the fifth madhab of Islam. Right? Yeah. And the Salafis are outraged. How can you be saying something like this from a Salafi perspective? So it's like, we thought you were our friends, but I think there was a misunderstanding from the beginning. They just didn't like the traditions for different reasons, but they were not fine for the same things. So I think it's important in the end to look at these. I love Samuli Shilka's book. I don't know if you've read it. Samuli Shilka has a great book on Egypt about the Mawlids and the Salafi attitude to the Mawlids. It's an anthropological study. And what he's showing is how the very modernists, even the secularists in the first half of the 20th century, hate Mawlid just as much as the Salafis, because both of them hate it from a very different perspective. The secularists are like, what is this? This makes us look backward. We want to be like Europeans. We don't want to be doing religious celebrations that, look irrational to them. And the Salafis completely agree with them, but from a different perspective. So Shilka shows a lot of this connection, and people sometimes might use both discourses. They would overlap. They would tell you, well, I don't like this for religious reasons, but it also backwards. So sometimes those two discourses would mix. So in a sense, that's what's complicated with these categories, because sometimes they're blurred. Now, I'm not pretending they're not blurry, I'm referring to, yeah.